9 years in Formula 1, 180 Grand Prix, 2,444 points, 93 podiums, a record 10 consecutive Grand Prix wins, and 3 back-to-back world titles. There are plenty of ways to describe the career of Max Verstappen, but greatness is a far more simple one. And when we look at the modern era of Formula 1, there's a rather obvious trio of great drivers that stands out in the results table. First Michael Schumacher, then Lewis Hamilton, and now Max Verstappen have risen to greatness over the last 2.5 decades in Formula 1. All those emotions in Red Bull's title-winning celebrations after the Qatar sprint encapsulate just what it means to Max, Jos, Christian, Helmut, Jonathan, Adrian and the rest of the Red Bull team to get back and supersede their winning ways of the V8 era in a regulation era that was designed to give us close championships and battles for the lead. They've run off into the distance with the rocket ship of an RB19 and an unwavering commitment to excellence at every possible point within their garage and factory. Every so often, a new name is added to the conversations that pundits used to have about Senna, Prost, Fittipaldi, Lauda, Hill, Hunt, Clark, and all the famous names of the past. And there is, of course, a certain uniqueness to these conversations within Formula 1 that differ from the debates we see in other sports. To some extent, it's an individual sport, right? Like tennis or golf, where we see equally hotly debated talking points about the greatest of all time between the big three in tennis or Tiger and Nicklaus in golf. The individuality of driving in Formula 1 and the solitary nature of that life experience is wholly juxtaposed though, with the hundreds and thousands of people working every single weekend in the factory of the teams and in the pit lane to give the drivers the best chance to win. And if I try to factor in all of those variables, this would be a very, very long video. But instead we're going to look at the headlines of all the big three names of this era, establish what greatness means to them, and also unpack exactly why debates about the greatest of all time are so ever present in media and how tiresome they can become. So to start, I'll do my best to recap just how Max Verstappen has entered this conversation as one of the greatest of all time. His career was characterised by youth and performance under pressure, right? Coming into Formula 1 first in Japan in 2014 and then making his Toro Rosso debut along Sainz in 15, his Red Bull debut and win-on debut in 2016, and then just kind of carrying on from there. But it wasn't a career at the start that was personified by the kind of metronomic reliability and performance that we're seeing in the modern age. It's a story of development and of maturity as Max develops throughout his years, right? The driver development strategy that Red Bull used for Max Verstappen was both so extreme and so typically Red Bull. First with Sebastian and then Daniel Ricciardo and then Max Verstappen after that. They were all put in the car so young and allowed them to basically get a head start on the maturity, the understanding of how to succeed in Formula 1 of all the drivers within their age bracket. And I think particularly being Daniel Ricciardo's teammate for Max throughout those years in the top Red Bull seat was so crucial for allowing him to understand what it takes to compete at the front of Formula 1, because it's not a perfect career, right? His reputation at the start, like many young drivers, like Lewis's was at the start, like Seb's used to be, was being too aggressive, too many crashes, so many little mistakes that were messing up his future potential. But that speed was there from the start. We saw that, of course, in Barcelona 2016, and I think most memorably in Sao Paulo 2016, when he was coming back through on the intermediate tyres, and people started talking about the Max Verstappen line, the karting line, around the outside where you could find extra grip, and the daring confidence of this young boy coming on and taking it to the World Championship leaders under such treacherous conditions. Then in 2019, after Daniel Ricciardo left to go to Renault, we saw a perfect case of just how large that margin was that Max had to the rest of the young drivers in the sport. He was so much more experienced with the Red Bull team, with the car, with their processes within the garage, that we saw for both Gasly, Albon and now Perez, just how impressive and consistent Max Verstappen can be because of that leapfrog in development. 2020 for Max was characterised by the Ham-Ver-Bot era, where Lewis was still winning everything, but Verstappen was able to make up the difference of the car advantage that Valtteri Bottas has. This really put the writing on the wall then for the following season, in which we saw that epic battle between Lewis and Max throughout the year, from Bahrain, around the world and then back to the Abu Dhabi desert for the finale. That year, of course, Lewis and Max brought both the best and maybe some of the worst parts out of each other when we saw that championship fight last all the way to the end of the final lap of the final race. 2022 followed that with a more dominant era for Red Bull, as Verstappen was in a battle with Charles Leclerc for the World Championship rather than Lewis Hamilton. It used to be that we'd only talk about Max Verstappen winning exciting races in Formula 1, and it's funny to see how that's completely turned around in the last few years. But greatness to Max Verstappen is that level of performance and that level of consistency. He always focuses on it in interviews, whether he's getting asked about how he wins championships or how he stays motivated every day, whatever questions the journalist can come up with. He always talks about finding that level of perfectionism in every radio communication, in every inch of setup change, every millimetre on the car, every bit of the development he can help with, whether it's in the sim in the factory, on track in practice. He's always trying to get that little bit more out of every single part in the team. And you see that culture then extend through the team manager, the team principal, and it's probably not something that Max brought himself, but something he was taught by the team at Red Bull to help everyone maximise performance. And when the driver rises to that level, it forces everyone in the factory to, because you know that you're guaranteed to be able to maximise points on Sunday with a driver that talented. It kind of pulls the best out of everyone within that Red Bull team, and it's surely why they've gone on to be so great. It's not just Max on his own, but he's a huge part of it. And when we talk about those sort of themes, about perfectionism in every single point, what stands out to me then is how similar that sounds to the career of Michael Schumacher and what he brought to Ferrari when he went there in 1996 to help them rebuild, to help them get their first ever title since 1979, and just how they did it was so incredible. So for Michael, it was 19 seasons in Formula 1 with 306 starts, 91 wins, 68 poles, 155 podiums, 7 world titles, and a historic 5 consecutive titles from 2000 to 2004. And I think you can predict the format of this video and the word that I'm going to use to describe him now, and that is of course greatness. First joining Formula 1 with Jordan, and then Benetton for 92 to 95, his first 2 world titles, and of course that infamous moment with Damon Hill in Australia. Then going to Ferrari, as I said, and that career revival with the post-Braun Brackley Mercedes outfit alongside our equal machinery king Nico Rosberg. Michael Schumacher, in many ways, like Max and Lewis, entered Formula 1 as an enigmatic young star, the expectations of a nation behind him. And I think in a lot of ways it was Michael's approach to racing, just like we talked about Max's. The detail, the professionalism, the determination, all the adjectives, and that strive for perfection in every moment that underpinned his greatness in Formula 1. Things like changing the differential and the brake balance for every corner of the twisty Monte Carlo circuit to extract that extra 100th of a second, and building a team of excellence of high performance around him, and keeping that going with a huge margin not only to his teammate and the rest of the field, but keeping that margin there for years and years and years. That 5-year streak of drivers' titles is as yet unmatched in Formula 1 history. And just like we saw Max Verstappen take that inspirational victory at Barcelona in 2016, it played host in 1996 to a torrentially wet race in which Michael Schumacher took home his first win for Ferrari in the Tifosi. Arriving in Barcelona off the back of a crash at the infamously DNF-heavy 1996 Monaco Grand Prix, Michael was starting the Spanish Grand Prix in third, but he fell instantly down the grid after a clutch problem messed up the start and caused carnage behind him. But as the rain continued and the championship leader Damon Hill spun out of the lead and into the wall on lap 12, Michael fought forward, past Jacques Villeneuve to take the lead of the race, and lapped over 3 seconds per lap faster than the rest of the remaining field, in those incredibly wet and dangerous conditions, to take his first win for the red colours of the Tifosi. Sterling Moss said after the race about Michael that it was not a race, it was a demonstration of brilliance. And when you've got drivers like that singing your praises, you could trust then and there that Michael was about to become one of the all-time greats. The next chapter in Michael Schumacher's career was then that rivalry with Mika Hakkinen through the years where McLaren and Ferrari battled. First McLaren won, and then in 2000 it was a triumphant victory for the Tifosi to bring them their first title with Michael. And that set the stage for that iconic era of the screaming V10s and the Bridgestones and the incredible winning margins and the podium runs that we saw from those years where you could have fresh engines every race, where Ferrari was spending and getting the best equipment, the best drivers, and the best chances to win. And Michael was capitalising on all of that to bring home historic numbers. And with that then, I think you can establish quite a clear similarity between the ideas of greatness that we're now attributing to Max Verstappen and what was said about Michael Schumacher in the past. Elements like his gaps to his teammates and that persistent level of winning margins, consistency in wet conditions, not only was that attributed to Schumacher, but it's now what we're saying about Max. And the fact that we're even making that comparison in the first place is a testament to just how incredible Max's development has been and the rewards that Red Bull are getting for putting him in that car so early. So on to Lewis Hamilton then. 17 seasons, 327 starts, 4,599 points, 103 wins, 196 podiums, 7 world titles and a knighthood. Lewis joined Formula 1 in 2007 as a GP2 champion and Ron Dennis's prodigy for the future of McLaren alongside the reigning double world champion Fernando Alonso. I think you probably know most of the rest of the story from there. But unlike Max and Michael, Lewis's legacy, perhaps unlike many others, will go far beyond the racetrack. And fundamentally, while he entered the sport as a young gun with expectations so high that ITV commentator James Allen said before his first start in Australia that there's something of a star in that boy. With his personality, individualism and activism, Lewis changed what it meant to be a Formula 1 driver and fundamentally what people thought an F1 driver could be. Let's cut back to Lewis's first season in Formula 1 in 2007 at the Canadian Grand Prix. A 22-year-old Lewis Hamilton has qualified on pole for the first time at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve and leads after a battle with Fernando Alonso into the first corner. And he holds onto that lead throughout plenty of crash and penalty chaos behind him to take his first win in Formula 1 in his 6th ever race, as well as the World Championship lead. It was such a huge moment both for Lewis personally and the United Kingdom to have our next potential Formula 1 world champion winning races for the first time. Then if we fast forward to Silverstone in 2008, now in his second year, Lewis has fallen to 4th in the World Drivers' Championship. Despite taking the victory in Monte Carlo, he's under plenty of pressure from the media and the FIA for incidents at Manicourt in Montreal. But the Sunday story starts, as many legendary F1 moments do, with rain and Lewis Hamilton lining up in P4 in front of his home crowd, with his teammate Heikki Kovalainen on pole for the only time in his career. And after taking the lead on lap 5 and effectively maintaining it throughout pit stop cycles, Lewis led by over a minute at the final checkered flag and delivered a powerful message in the World Championship and to the fans in the year that he would go on to win the title in the final lap of the final race. The margin of victory was the largest since the 1995 Australian Grand Prix. And if we cut forward again from there to 2020, when Lewis is taking his 7th world title in crazy conditions and the interslick strategy, you've got spins and mistakes all around the grid. And in that time, in that moment, Lewis delivered the stability and the metronomic predictability of a champion's drive, saying in his post-race message that I've got to say thank you to all my family. We dreamed of this when we were young watching the Grand Prix, and this is way, way beyond our dreams. It's so important for kids. Dream the impossible. You've got to work for it, chase for it, never give up and doubt yourself, which you have to argue is a pretty great message. And I think more widely, on the topic of greatness and these amazing characters that we have in Formula 1, what's important to remember is that nobody's perfect, and that's exactly what you want in sport. To lose, to be disappointed, and to rise from that to win again. That emotional journey, that's the reason we're not all just reading these results off a point table. That's what we tune in to see every weekend and what we feel when we watch our favourite driver stand at the top and celebrate for their anthem. In many ways, for Formula 1, it's far more important that each fan supports who they feel is the greatest for them than trying to reduce everything and factor every variable into some grand equation. So much of the sport can already be viewed in that mathematical, predictable, factual sense, letting emotions in here, and the fact that we get to do this, we get to have this comparison, is a greater positive sign for the sport than coming up with a single answer. Before, it was comparing Seb to Fernando and Michael, or Michael to Senna, or Prost to Senna, or Lauda to Prost, or Fittipaldi, or Hunt, or Clark, or Fangio, like we spoke about in the intro. And having the new name of Max Verstappen to add to that conversation shows that both the next generation of young drivers are up to the same level as the greats of the past. And despite its huge flaws, there is still some success in the junior ladder that we have in racing. We're seeing Liam Lawson potentially get a drive next year. We've seen Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, George Russell, Alex Albon all come through the ranks as successful young drivers. They could be greats in the future. If any of them get titles, we'll be debating this again. For me personally, I think the only argument that could give Max the edge in the future over Michael and even Lewis is the multi-equipment dominance potential that he has. For me personally, if you want a single answer, I think the only thing that Max could do in his career to get him over that edge of Schumacher and Hamilton's levels of greatness is to win in multi-class racing. We know how much he loves sim racing and he wants to take that turn to GT racing and to being a team owner in the future. If he can go and win at Le Mans, win at Daytona and establish a real foundation linking both World Championship sports car racing and the Formula 1 World Championship, it's something that of course Michael did at the start of his career, but we're really yet to see someone unify both of those in the modern era. I think if Max can almost do that in a single run, you're putting him more in the conversation with Graham Hill or Mario Andretti or Tony Stewart when you talk about those multi-class racing giants. If he can be the best Formula 1 driver of all time and the best multi-class racer of all time, he would become pretty undeniable. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments and make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn the notifications on so you never miss an upload from us. You can also check out our website crash.net for coverage across the motorsport world, but for now it's all eyes forward to the US Grand Prix this weekend at the Circuit of the Americas.